Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.
So welcome back to the Inner Athlete Podcast, the first podcast of 2024. I have got a good friend of mine, Mr. Casey Callison, all the way over in the US. Is it North Carolina at the moment?
Yeah, North Carolina, yep.
Cool. So Casey works in the baseball world at the moment over in the US, and we are close friends. We were interns together at the University of Wisconsin. And we basically, when we first met each other to the last day we met each other, we've just kind of like forged our own paths within the S&C world. Obviously with Casey being in the US in the baseball area, and obviously with Inner Athlete for myself. So Casey, just want to give us a bit of a quick spiel, who you are, what you do, who you look after, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, for sure, man. And don't forget to leave out, we were actually roommates too. We didn't just work together; we were living together. So that was a really good time. And that's when we first met. Was back with Kevin Schultz in Madison, and we had interned for a bit there in the collegiate level. And since then, most recently, what I've been doing has been working within professional baseball with the Toronto Blue Jays on their minor league side. My first year with them was back in 2018. And I've kind of I've been lucky enough to work with essentially almost like every level that we have to offer there. Everything from like our rookie levels to like we have low A, high A, and I'm currently in the double A level. I've been there for this will be my fourth season there. And for anybody that's not as familiar with like what those levels mean, essentially like when the Toronto Blue Jays or any professional baseball team drafts a player, is they bring him in, you kind of assess, grade them out, like where do they kind of, fit within the system. And then, the rookie level, which is basically, we call it our Florida Coast League now. It was something different when I first started, but they'll start at our complex, just kind of get their feet wet. But then they move from rookie ball or complex league to low A, then they go to high A, double A, triple A, and then they make it to the bigs. Prior to COVID, we had actually had more levels. We had rookie ball, like a higher level rookie ball, a short season low A, high A, double A, triple A. So it's like we've lost a couple leagues over the years just of like restructuring of things. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing since, and that kind of gives you guys a little bit of a breakdown of what the system looks like and kind of what the strength and conditioning coaches, like the different levels that we have within that system.
Yeah, maybe just go through a typical week. What is it, or a typical day, or what does it look like from S&C from, I guess, a preseason perspective? At the moment, it's winter over there. Obviously, you'll be wrapping up for spring.
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like from an S&C perspective?
Yeah, and that's a good way to kind of look at it, right? Is you got your preseason, in season, and off season, if you will, and you could even break it up further if you'd like, from there, if you wanted to get really specific. But I'll kind of walk you through like what we're doing now and like spring training stuff too, and any other questions we can hit that. But so right now it's essentially just staying in touch with guys throughout the off season. We set goals for guys in the off season, so essentially it's like, hey man, you need to work on strength, power, mobility, whatever it might be. And we just basically stay in touch. We'll do like a monthly check-in, talk on the phone, send video. We prescribe all of our training. We use the training apps for that. So the guys have access to all of it, but it's really just kind of like being in touch with guys and coaching from afar, answering any questions that guys may have, and just really making sure that guys are on the right path, so that way they can have a solid start to the year and also build some solid foundation work. Because the thing is, I'm gonna have to head down for camps here at the end of the month of January. So it's like essentially you got guys kind of starting to gear up from February, and they're playing from, or whatever, ramping up from February and playing all the way through September. And then if they go on to, if you're into the playoffs, you're playing deeper into September. If you're going to like a fall league or you're playing winter ball. So the big thing for us right now is making sure that foundational, if you want to call it GPP work, we hit that a little bit earlier in the off season. But it's a lot more of the like higher volume early on, lower intensity for patterning work. And then now it's a bit more like max strength, or maybe you have some guys getting the more power work. But it's just making sure that we can hit that, because as soon as the season comes around, those guys are, they're baseball players and they need to be focusing on that. So we have to be a little bit more meticulous there. So again, right now it's a lot of like staying in touch and making sure that we're really, really developing good work capacity and strength for the guys.
Awesome. I guess working in a professional organization, you see, there's a lot of money. These athletes are worth quite a bit of change. So
For sure.
in order to get to that level, like what are some of the things at the pro levels, whether it's, they're playing, double A or whatever they're being graded and whatever league they're playing in, what are some of the key things that allow them, number one, in order to get there, number two, allow them to to be successful in the long term?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, and I think it really does. Like, there's a couple ways you can look at it, but I feel like this resonates the most with me right now after the past couple of years of working in it. It depends for people. Like, you're gonna have some folks or some kids that come in that they have that God-given talent where they can throw 100 or just hit the crap out of a ball. So it's like you're gonna have those individuals that maybe didn't have to work as hard for it, but just have it. And then you're going to have those other ones that maybe they didn't have it and they had to work really hard, and they still may have more room to grow. But I think what it really kind of comes down to see the long-term success of both of those type of athletes is really just having like a disciplined work ethic, and also self-awareness of being willing to grow, and like basically having the mindset that you have to go in every day and like you have to sharpen the knife, that you can't necessarily sleep on what you're doing, in the sense that there's so many teams that are out there, not even just within professional ball that we have within the US. It's like there's professional ball teams all over the world. We'll have guys that go play in like the Dominican, Japan, Europe. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like there's so much competition out there that you can't take things for granted, and that you kind of have to have that student mindset where it's like, okay, here's what I have for the day. Here's what I've been given for the tools to help me, or this is how I've been, let's just say, how I've been assessed and what my goals have been given to me. Is when you see guys that really show ownership and really take that in, and show their want to be there, and they're consistent. That's probably the biggest thing that is a standout for guys, because there's been dudes that I've seen where it's an unfortunate side of the game, but guys will get cut. I mean, honestly, staff members can get cut too. But it's like you'll see so and so's on the cut list, and it's like, that's something tough to see as a coach. But I've seen also plenty of guys that have been on that list where it's like they end up making it to the bigs. And the biggest thing that stands out for them is the fact that they always showed up no matter what happened. And they would just continue to work. But also, again, it was like you're able to sit there and understand that there's going to be ebbs and flows. You can't freak out. You can't go too far off the path. And you also can't slack off, if you will. I'm talking for guys that'll want to do too much, or guys that won't want to do enough. It's really the guys that can kind of control the emotions and have a good system day in and day out. Like, that's going to provide the best structure for you to get, the best that you can get, and to give you the, go as far as you can go.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more finding that middle ground between, pushing yourself as hard as possible without burning yourself out. But then it's really just kind of controlling that enthusiasm at the same time as well. Or if they've got a lack of enthusiasm, you got to find ways to bring that enthusiasm up, or that motivation up. And maybe it's coming down to reestablishing goals with them, reestablishing some sort of focus and clear direction with them, and kind of forging a bit of a path for them to actually, in order to really get where they want to be, and probably more breaking it down. And I know I've alluded to in previous podcasts, in talking about having like a training diary and really just tracking what you're doing. I know as strength coaches, we track what we do. It's a really big thing. We want to make sure we're tracking the weights. In general, we want to see the weights go up over time. Or if we're doing power training or speed training, we want to see the velocity improve, or whatever the sets and reps, the amount of reps you can get done in a particular set should improve, right? If you're doing AMRAPs or something along those lines. We want to be able to track this. This gives us a general idea if they're actually moving in the right direction, to actually show us that specific characteristic that we're really achieving. So if it's, something about speed training, we're measuring, a 20-meter dash, which is probably just over about 22 yards, they might be doing in 3.2 seconds, more for a junior athlete. The goal is we want to, break that 3-second mark. If we're not tracking that on a regular basis, or at least frequent enough, it's like, how do we know what we're doing is actually going towards that direction, where we know speed has a huge carryover into a lot of sports? And that well, research is out there. The faster you are, the more dangerous you become for that particular sport. So it's one of those things, yeah, where the athlete themselves, there is some sort of onus and accountability on the athlete to, I guess, drive it, but us as as coaches, or even the actual the skills coach, or whoever it may be, the head coach, should be able to create some sort of structure or system for them to be able to flourish. And I think that's our job as strength coaches, is be able to facilitate that, but we're not necessarily trying to drive it. It's the athlete has to do the work at the end of the day. We just provide the tools, the resources, the soundboard, the brick wall, kind of keep them into their lane where they need to be in order to keep moving in the direction that they want to achieve. Obviously that direction needs to be in line with the club's direction as well. So if the Blue Jays are looking to make the playoffs and go deep into the playoffs, okay, you have to break it down to real big, like really bite-sized chunks. What does that look? What does our win-loss need to be? Do we need to change the batting structure? There's so many, moving components when it comes to a club, but then the athlete themselves can actually fit within that as well if they know, and like you said before, have that self-awareness of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then they address that specifically and create that awareness, utilizing a training diary in that sense.
Yeah, no, that's the nail on the head, man, for sure.
Yeah. I don't know how I explain things. It's just like, I talk a lot of shit, as you're already aware of.
No, and it is, man. It's like, that's exactly what it is. And I think any strength coach out there would agree. It's, everybody learns differently, and some people, some athletes aren't going to learn after the first time, after the second time. So it's really like, we just have to provide the framework and the foundation for them. Again, like the thing that's different for us, like when we were back at Wisconsin together, it's, at that point, they're student athletes. They're not professional athletes at that point. I know there's been a lot changing, and I can't really speak to what it's like necessarily, but I know there's more of like getting deals for them, this and that. But I mean, whether that's the comparison, or maybe it's a D3 athlete where it's like nobody's getting paid to be there. It's like, at the end of the day, at the pro level, if say you gave whatever player $1 million, 2 million, 3 million, whatever. I mean, there's been guys that have signed for 10 million and more. It's like, especially if that's a young person, they're probably going to have some confidence there. The fact they've been invested in quite with that much money, which again, like the team does see a lot of value there. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's just making sure that we're doing everything that we can to allow for them to make the best decision for themselves, even if it's not going to be something that we would necessarily recommend. But that's where I've really thought over the past couple of years too, is like, and maybe we can use coach and teacher in the same way, but a lot of my stuff that I'm doing with guys is like, yeah, I'll coach them up, I'll have the cues, this and that. But that's what I love, and what we're so fortunate with within the Blue Jays organization, is like, we have so many different ways for us to help guys understand what they need to be doing, whether it's through our force plates for doing jumps, if it's doing some stuff with like GPS or like workload tracking, where we're able to track the amount of throws for guys or swing rotations. It's like, we have so much stuff that you would traditionally have to go and look, excuse me, look to research of how somebody else did it in a very controlled setting. It's like, we have all that stuff available to us, and even more, to where it's like, we're essentially doing our own research every day with these guys, and we have all these different individual cases, to where it's like, we're literally like, we're getting it as individualized for them as possible. So at the end of the day, it comes down to, it's like, hey, it was a high training day for you, it was a moderate throwing day, we did an easy cardio day, and you said your rest was like this. By the way, the heart rate monitor or your HRV was at this. It's like, dude, we have so much stuff here for you. Again, I can't do the work for you, but I'm giving you everything that we can. So that's what I've really loved about it. And not even just with the Jays, but it's like, that's our field, right? It's like, we're trying to educate people and get them on the right path for whatever their goal might be. If it's just getting in shape, if it's, making it to the 40-man roster, or playing in the World Series, or whatever it might be. But it's so much fun. And I was kind of short and sweet with it, because at the same time, I was like, you said everything that I wanted to, but then I also thought about this as you're talking to, of like, kind of that teacher role, and working with the different personality types throughout sports.
Yeah. And I guess going to the practical sense in terms of the preparatory work. So what do you like to see when rookies do enter the system? You might have, I'm not too sure what the draft eligibility rule is over there for baseball, but what is the rule? So, because I know with the NBA, you just got to do one season of college, then you can enter the draft. NFL is a little bit different. You could do 3 seasons. before you can enter the draft. So what's the eligibility? I can't even say the word. How do you become eligible?
Eligibility.
Eligibility. There we
Yeah.
go. How do you become? I guess how do you enter that? And how many years do you have to do in baseball before you can, I guess, enter the draft?
Sure. That's actually a really good question. I don't know the full answer to it. I can kind of speak on like what we have. I think for like I know we have some really young Latin players. And now that's like an international draft. But I mean, we're talking like we'll easily have teenagers. Like I'm not talking like we have 13-year-olds, but primarily it's like, by the time a guy gets stateside to working in the complex, you're probably working with 17, 18-year-olds within our rookie level team. So, and again, without knowing like the nuances of like how old do you have to be before you're eligible to be drafted, that I'm not sure. But what I will say, like to kind of look into preparatory stuff from like an S&C side of things too, though, is with the players' first year within the organization, like the biggest focus is just kind of introducing them to like the Blue Jay way, if you will, where it's like, hey, from an S&C standpoint, it's going to be like, hey man, like you got to make sure that you're preparing your body every day. You're going to be playing baseball every day for the rest of your pro career. Like you're going to have to come in and do some preparatory work. Here's the training that we value. We want to make sure that you're hitting full ranges of motion, that you can control tempo work, that you have good, proximal stability, all these different things. But it really just comes down to the routine side of, are you preparing? Are you getting your work in? And then are you recovering? And that kind of goes for everything from, S&C, athletic training, because they're going to have arm care programs for them. They're going to have some ranges of mobility that we'd like to be able to maintain. And that's a collaboration between S&C and the athletic training coaches, I suppose is the abbreviation for it. And then same thing from like a mental performance side. Are you mindful? Are you cognizant of what you have to focus on for the day? Are you using a training journal? Are you journaling? And then from the dietitians as well, like are you hitting all your meals? Or if you have a weight gain goal, are you getting the mass gainers? Are you getting your snacks in that you need to? So it really is just, it's a lot of the foundational stuff. And I think the reason why it is so important is because a lot of people will look over that, where it's maybe you make it to the pros or that next level. Maybe you make it to your sorry, what would the term be? Like a school recruits you and you make it onto a college team. You get all excited and you think you've made it, but it's like, no, you have to continue doing what you're doing. It's really not a ton of different things. It's just the fact that now your competition is that much better, and you really need to refine this foundational stuff that you're doing, because you gotta. It's like the saying, the best ability is availability.
Yeah, it's like every time you enter a new world, so whether it's going from high school to college or college to professional, yes, you are being selected because you may be the top 1% of that pool. So if you go from high school and maybe you go to LSU, big baseball program there, and then you're basically, yes, you are the top, you might be the top guy in high school, but now you kind of have to work your way up again. But the standard's higher, as you alluded to before. And then as you might play for 2 or 3 years and I guess improve and develop more of a foundation whilst with LSU, then you might have a breakout year. Then you might enter the draft or you might get selected. I'm not too sure how it works, but then you enter the rookie program. So then you're starting at the bottom again. So every time you enter a different organization, whether it's high school, college, or professional, you are technically starting at the bottom again. But you kind of, like you said, is you're learning the system or you're learning the way that that organization has been successful as well. So it's all about just laying that foundational work. And look, it's the same here in Australia as well when it comes to, especially with high school sports, and then also like junior programs, is we skip the foundational work. The foundational work is kind of like laying the concrete slab. It ain't sexy, it doesn't look good, but it will enable you to be more successful because everything else can be built upon top on that. And the longer that you can build on that foundational work, the higher the peak is going to be. Yes, it's going to take a little bit more time, but it's going to be a lot more sustainable success. Your ebbs and flows, your your highs will be highs, but your lows won't be that low, which I think is a really, really important thing, because if you've kind of skipped pre-season, off-season, then you kind of come into pre-season, you're playing a lot of catch-up. I remember reading an article It was about a player who plays professional rugby league up in Queensland, and he came back 10 kilos or 22 pounds overweight. So basically, the coach said it alluded to this. He basically entered like his own fat camp, so he has to drop a lot of that weight for the off season, and he's doing it by himself. So he's got 2 weeks to trying to drop a lot of weight in order to return back to the club. And it's that kind of work, because what you'll find is the more that all organizations do in terms of whether they build their arsenal of coaches and like really good players, and their scouting improves over time. I think the movie Moneyball comes to mind as well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Great movie. You understand the players and the resources you have available, and they really stretch their dollar. When it came to Oakland. That's what's going to happen. It becomes more of an arms race between organizations as well. And then you're keeping up with what the general trend is. Then if you're doing really well or being really consistent, that is valued upon other clubs as well. Then they might put an offer in that your current club probably can't match. Then it becomes more of a bidding war. Then basically your value as a player has improved or has increased. Right, it's your market value. It's almost like working on your property. You buy a property, the dumpster fire. You might have paid $300,000 for it. It might be a nice area, but it looks like crap. You pump in an extra $100,000, you do it up, and then what is it worth now? It's worth like 500, 550, whatever it may be. It's pretty much like that essentially, where you kind of have to treat yourself as a property or a house where you're trying to build up the value and equity within the organization that you're in. Obviously, you're learning and developing a robust body. Then you might develop the stats for that to constitute the value for someone else to purchase you.
Yeah. No, that's a really good way to look at it. And I mean, you see it all the time. I mean, whether it's players or coaches, if there's a coach at some place that isn't getting the job done, they'll be done. They'll look to bring somebody else in. Maybe they were, whatever sport you're in, if they're an assistant coach or something like that, or even at a lower level, somebody really likes them, seeing what they've done. I mean, I've even seen too, there's a football coach here in the US, like US football, or American football. But he was a Division III football coach. And I think with the time that he was in D3 sports, he went something crazy like 111-9, and it's something around that ballpark. And it was over like 10 plus years. So it's like this guy just absolutely dominated. He goes up, gets to like a smaller D1, and now he's the head coach over at Kansas. And within like, if you look at his past 3 years, it's like the first year, nothing too great. Next year, they're about like a 500 team, and then I think it was like this year they went like 9-2 or something, or whatever the records were. I don't know, but it basically went from like less than a 20% win rate to 50%, and now it's like we're looking at 80 to like a 90%. So it's so much as it doesn't matter if you're a player or if you're a coach. It's really just building that equity, like you said, and showing your value to everybody around you. But I mean, again, it comes down to the end of the day for a lot of us, though, especially for coaches. Like the reason why we do it is because we enjoy helping people. Not that players don't like helping people, but at the end of the day, like that's their career and they have to compete. A little bit different in that sense, but it does always come back to like build that value.
Keep an eye out on the second installment of our conversation. If you want to stay updated on the latest episodes, make sure to subscribe to Inner Athlete on both YouTube and Spotify.